We're awaiting the arrival of our special guest today, Stephen Howard. He's an author on leadership. For many years, he's written 22 books. His latest book is called HUMONY, HUMONY. He made up the name as a result of his studies and his research into crisis leadership and how the old ways aren't working anymore. So his new book sort of self-actualizes his own work and his own thinking over a number of years. HUMONY, leadership, HUMONY leadership. That's HUMONY. It's about mindsets, skills, and behaviors for being a successful, people-centric leader. Stephen Howard, an award-winning author, takes a straightforward and sure-footed look into a people-centric leadership approach that will enable managers in big companies, in small companies, to deal with unpredictability and ambivalence. He presents a roadmap, and I'm going to have to read this. He presents a roadmap in a world that is dynamic with AI strategies. Stephen presents a leadership model based on our instinctive human capabilities and our all-embracing desire for cooperation and unity. Accessible and jargon-free, Stephen Howard has organized the text to encourage a new pathway that differs from traditional styles of leadership and one that is adaptable to a world that is ever-changing and turbulent. It's very current. Undoubtedly heartfelt and bold, Stephen Howard argues that the galvanizing factor that company success, for company success, is harmonizing and humanizing the workplace. People will flourish together in a collective purpose that's communicated clearly. So he's written this book. It's number 22 in his library. Amazing, isn't it? He covers each chapter. He presents each chapter building on the other. I'm reading what is written in the Amazon. As each topical chapter builds upon the other with a sharp focus and subtopics, careful readers will be able to master this refreshing model. And readers will be reminded of the importance of valuing employees for a company to reach its destination. Buoyant with helpful quotes at the beginning of each chapter, serves as hints to the subject matter coming forward. HUMONY, that's HUMONY, HUMONY leadership mindset, skills, and behaviors for being a successful people-centric leader, builds up to a conclusion that recapitulates the main points, bolstered by the authors, that's Stephen Howard, bolstered by Stephen's bold and easygoing tone. Now, I happen to know Stephen, and that's exactly the kind of person. So we're dealing with authenticity. He says successful leadership is an impactful process where leaders implement everyday sensible strategies that help people and organizations thrive. Stephen is a well-informed guy, has a lot to teach, as he offers a timeless approach to leadership bound to stimulate success in the future. Further, his self-reflective summaries done at the end of every chapter are touch points in the author's primary message, overflowing with nuggets of wisdom that every leader needs to read. They call it a 5-star compendium. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to welcome Stephen Howard, the author. Thank you. Stay tuned. We're back, and here's Stephen Howard, the author of HUMONY. Do you have a copy of the book handy you can stick in the camera?
Oh, what a question, Ed. What a question. Actually, there, it shows up pretty good there. With the background, it might not show up, but
No, it shows fine. And if you want to just raise it up a little bit, it's disappearing because of the fake background.
Yeah.
But I see it. It's HUMONY, and that's a lot better. If you want to bring it closer to the green light, that would be great. And then raise it up so you can see the image. Yeah, that's great. A little higher. And so tell us what HUMONY means to you.
Oh, well, Ed, HUMONY to me is a new mindset for leadership. I created the word. It's not in the dictionary yet, although I have somebody says he wants to do a movement to put it in the dictionary, which would be nice. But HUMONY, HUMONY, I combine the words human, humanity, and harmony. And it really to emphasize the need to lead people in today's world, but also the need for leaders to create workplaces of wellness and harmony. And people scoff at me when I ask them, is there harmony in your workplace? And they say, what are you talking about? But I think that's something we need to focus on.
Harmony in the workplace. So this is book number 22. I don't mean to embarrass you, but I want the audience to understand that you've been thinking about and writing about and practicing leadership coaching for a long time. And what is the HUMONY website?
HUMONYleadership.com. I talk more about the principles behind HUMONY, behind the concept of HUMONY leadership, why we need harmony in the workplace. There's a couple paragraphs on that people should to take a look at, hopefully. But yeah, HUMONYleadership.com.
So, you know, when you think of big company management, I remember as a kid in business school, managing, everything was managing. And you're talking about the reality that people don't want to be managed, they want to be developed.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's the whole basis here, isn't it?
That's one of the underlying premises of the book, and that's why I call it a mindset change. I mean, quite frankly, managing people is a 1980s construct. It made a lot of sense 40 years ago, but it's no longer applicable and relevant in today's world. We're hiring people for their brains. So if we want people's ideas and creativity and innovation, why would we manage them? Why would we tell them what to do instead of leading them and motivating them? One of my pet phrases is that you manage things, you manage policies, you manage processes, you manage procedures, but you lead people. And Perfect. That's a huge distinction. Yeah.
So looking back at your history of yourself, you've worked for many large companies and around the world, particularly in APAC, where you were involved huge companies. Did you have a role model in mind for HUMONY, this latest book? Actually, while you're going back then, I mean, were there some leaders in, was it Citibank or Chase or, you know, I forget which one you were in, but you're involved in marketing. And so did you rush into the office and think about being managed?
I had some really good bosses and I had some, well, let's just say not so good bosses at the time. I tried to forget. No, I had one really excellent boss at Citibank. Funny enough, and he was the country manager for Singapore. I reported to him. I was the vice president of marketing. I had 23 people reporting to me, which was the largest group I ever had at a time. And I learned a lot from him. His name's Dave. And I learned a lot from Dave. But I also learned, and Dave was a really great people manager. But I also learned that sometimes Dave was too good of a people manager. We didn't deliver the results we could have. So there is a fine line. So I'm not saying, to be a good people manager, you forget about results. I think being the best people manager, being what I call a people-centric leader, is how you get the results you need, sustainable results, long-term results. So Dave was great. I learned a lot from Dave. I took that into companies I did later and into my consultancy and coaching business as well.
This is really interesting. Let's talk about results, getting results. So it's not like somebody with a whip, right? Like a gladiator kind of coach, kind of leader. That's not what you're talking about, right?
No, not
it's
at
more
all.
of a mindset, right?
It's a mindset. But there are leaders who maybe they don't have that physical whip, but they have a verbal whip at times. And I think those who focus only on results are driving people away. I think one of the things that's come out of the pandemic, and that's why I wrote the book, really, is that this mindset change really escalated during the pandemic, during the work from home situations. And so, people who were abusive bosses, aggressive, loud, shouting, throwing things type bosses, they got results, no doubt about it. But they don't get sustainable results, and they're going to pay a price. And the price they're going to pay is employee turnover and the mental wellness of their employees, and maybe even their own mental wellness as well. So what I'm basically saying is you don't have to be that kind of boss. You need to change if you want employee loyalty, if you want creativity, if you want innovation, without a doubt.
So let me ask you about how the managers should change. First of all, do you change the title so that they're not called managers?
I would, although in some ways, and at least de-emphasize it. Look, people still have to be a manager at times. And this is where I call leadership an art. There are times you have to have that manager's leadership hat on. There are times when you have to make a decision. There are times when you don't need consensus. There are times when you do need to tell people what to do and how to do it. Mm-hmm. But if you're doing that 90% of the time, you're a manager. If you're doing that 15% of the time and motivating people and getting people involved and engaging with people, then you're a leader. And if you're a manager 90% of the time, I think that those are the people who will have higher employee turnover. They're the ones who will have the quiet quitting trends that are going on right now. And I've worked with an organization, US, I obviously won't name it, but it's a large retailer. And in one department, there were both types of managers. There was the old style, hardcore, aggressive type manager, and there was the more people-centric leader. Same organization, same department. The manager type had about 18 to 20% employee turnover, and the leader had like 6 or 7% employee. So same company, same department.
So these people have to be communicators. They have to learn about acting skills in order to communicate differently. They have to see themselves differently and then execute differently. They need to get more engagement and feedback, and from that in a non-threatening way somehow. I don't know how to do it, but maybe you would like to address that. How do you get and encourage and get feedback on two ways in a non-threatening way so that the staff, the reports, don't feel put upon, and yet somehow the relationship can grow and flourish within that kind of I wouldn't call it sharing, but the idea is coaching can develop from that kind of an encounter, right?
Coaching has developed from that. And that is the essence of coaching in many ways. What you talked about there, one of the key phrases, really nice way you phrase that, is that how you see yourself. Well, how you see yourself is your mindset. And so if you think about communicating, now, again, the old style leader focuses on communication. How do I get my message across? How do I deliver my message? People-centric leader, which will lead into the coaching, would stop and say, how do I listen better? How do I ask better questions of my team members, or my colleagues, my peers? Listening and questioning are the two key skills in communicating, not delivering in a leadership type position. We all think about the great orators, the Martin Luther Kings of the world. President Obama was really good at speaking. Obviously, Winston Churchill and others. They were great orators. But again, that's not when we're talking about organizational leadership.
Yeah, especially in the levels, not the C-suite, but
Exactly.
in the mid managers, because that's what has driven the quitting. It's the mid level where these people are stressed out because there's empty chairs in the room and not people, and because of remote working, and then they haven't received training, or they haven't bothered to, or they don't know how to do it, about how to manage remote people.
Exactly.
And now that, it sounds like a crazy making place.
It is. That's why people are leaving, because it's crazy. You hit a thought there for me. I'm trying to think here, but the interesting, it is that mid-level. And so this book I wrote in Human Leadership is not for the C-suite only. I mean, C-suite will benefit from, but it is for those first line leaders, the first time supervisor, the first time team leader, the second time leader, or second level leaders, we call it sometimes. But you're right, the first line leader, or what I often refer to as mid-level leaders, they're the glue between strategy and execution. And their problem is they're getting pushed down from the top to execute strategy, but they don't know how to involve people from the bottom up to get them involved, to get them to collaborate. And that's why we have so much drama and conflict in the workplace.
So managers, leaders have to unlearn what they learned at Harvard.
Yeah. Well, what I say, unlearn management, relearn to be human, and then also learn to be people centric. And again, that's the mindset change. These are skills that can be learned. The book has, I think, about 8 or 10 different skills in it. And one of them is about building relationships, what you were just referring to and talking about. There's a whole chapter about how to build stronger relationships with the people who report to you, as well as with your peers and colleagues.
So we're talking about a gap, and a GAP gap, which means this and there needs to be a bridge. So if you think of that concept, bridge is not going to fall down, or people aren't going to jump off the bridge. They actually want to get across a chasm, the valley of death here, the valley of quit. How do you get from there to over there and come out with, well, do these people want to make friends at work, or do they just want to have productivity?
Well, they want productivity, but the way to get productivity is you don't have to make friends, but is you have to be human. And again, you can get short-term productivity. Look, the problem is if you're 45, 50 years old and you've been very successful doing it one way, this is going to be a difficult change for you. And so you will be successful, but you're going to pay that price, just like the leader I was talking about earlier with the 18 to 20% employee churn compared to his peer in the same department with more of a 7 or 8% churn. You know what the bridge is? This probably could be a great book. I'd call it the bridge of trust. And so here's what and here's the bridge. The old style leader comes into a new department, he or she comes into a new company, and the old style leader says, all right, here's how you earn my trust. No, that won't work today. What I'm encouraging people to do in the book is to take the approach is, all right, I'm happy to be your leader. I trust you. Here's how you can lose my trust. Don't tell me when there's a problem. Cover something up. Lie to me. Don't bring it to me early enough when it is over your head. There are going to be things you'll encounter that you will need my help on, and I'm happy to help you on it. Bring it to me earlier rather than later. That's how you lose my trust if you don't do that. But start it off, start your relationships based on trust. Don't go in and say, people, you have to earn my trust. I'm your leader, I'm your boss, earn my trust. Who wants to work for that person?
So let's talk about this thing called well-being and stress management. So does a leader, a manager, a leader in the world of Humony do they have to learn how to be a social worker?
Not necessarily a social worker, but again, to be more human. I think there are things they need to learn. The number one thing, the people I coach today, I tell them, and your audience can go do this. Go Google the early warning signs of burnout. And there are 6 or 7 very specific. If you're a leader of people, you should know these. One, you should know them for yourself, but you should also know it so that you can see when people are approaching burnout, which is extremely easy to recognize. Let me cite you a statistic here. I'm just looking at my screen. This is a book called The Mindful Leader by Michael Bunting. Really nice book. And he in his book, which came out a couple of years ago, he said 33% of a team member's mental health is attributed to the leader's behavior. 1/3. And another one I'll share with you with some research last year came out. It showed that 83% of employees globally, so this is not just a US phenomenon, 83% of employees globally said their well-being is as important as their salary. Now, that wouldn't have happened 5 years ago, Ed. So that shows you how what people have learned, what people have taken into consideration through the pandemic. And this is why leadership mindsets and leadership behaviors have to change, because 83% of your employees are saying, my well-being is as important as what you pay me.
So let's do a little play acting here, a little bit of not this. No, actually, that's a bad phrase. Just a discussion about how a leader, a manager leader, a humany leader, manager, will approach somebody like me, who's an underling. And I have my own set of goals and objectives to develop me better.
Mhm.
So is that more play acting? How does a leader, a humany leader, help me, for instance, develop better or think better about what my goal is this week, this month?
Yeah. All right. So I'll start old style first. Hey, Ed, here's a project we're working on. Tell me what the status is. Are we on time? Are we on budget? And are you going to meet the deadline? The human leader would include those questions, but also say, Ed, what are the hurdles and obstacles that you think you're facing? What do you think might come up? What ideas do you have for how we might do this a little bit better, a little differently? And how confident are you in completing everything on time? And I love when an employee tells me that they're on a 7. And I don't want them off, particularly in the beginning of a I don't want somebody to be a 10 because they're overconfident they're going to make mistakes. Tell me a 7, and then follow-up question is, now what can I do to help get you to an 8 or 9? What resources do you need?
That's bingo. That's it right there.
That's it.
And then it becomes first of all, it's a friendly encounter, not a threatening encounter.
Yeah.
And the engagement and communication link, I'm trying to keep this simple, is to bond. And that's the basis for the next conversation.
Yeah. And becomes a dialogue. And you add to that, and depending on the person, you wouldn't do this in every meeting, particularly if you're having weekly updates or something, but you'd want to be doing this a couple times a year, or sorry, a couple times a month of what's impacting from the outside. So I think one of the big differences here, Ed, is that before the pandemic, that's a good place just to put our flag in the sand, so to speak. But before the pandemic, we used to talk about work-life balance. And we would say, oh yeah, employees have they have a life outside work. We understand that, but as long as they do it on Saturdays and Sundays and it doesn't interfere with their jobs, they can have their life outside. Now I think we need to talk about, goes back to that word harmony. We have to understand that people need work-life harmony, and also that people have responsibilities outside work, not just a life. They have responsibilities, and those responsibilities are important to them. And we as leaders need to recognize that. So whether you're caring for an aged parent, caring for your kids, coaching teenage sporting event or team, whatever you're doing, that's your responsibility. And to you as the individual, that's important to you. So if I'm your leader, I need to understand, hey, Ed, I know Ed has a life outside work, but now I know he has responsibilities outside work. I need to recognize that. I need to be adaptable and flexible to work with him so he can achieve those responsibilities. And he doesn't bring his angst about those responsibilities into the workplace. So if I'm giving you the leeway, the freedom to accomplish both, and I trust you that you're going to get done what I've asked you to do, I trust you, Ed. And if you need to take an hour and a half off on an afternoon to take your wife to a doctor appointment or your children or whatever it happens to do, I understand that. That's your responsibility. And we'll work around that. We'll work together on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it certainly does. You know what? Let's talk about or address the leadership issue of attracting and retaining young women of childbearing age, just young moms, or moms with young kids. And the issue of daycare, the issue of communications. There are some companies adopting this wild and crazy idea of bringing into the company building and some unused space now because of the growth of the people working off site, at least part of the time, the idea of a micro school meaning almost like a 1 or 2 room schoolhouse, but within the company walls, and professionally done right, education credentials assured, but it's almost like a private school within the company umbrella, and using that idea to attract women back to the office because they don't have to worry about where the kids are going to be, and if they're they're not learning anything, or if there's an issue. What about that idea of, say, there's a skyscraper or a big suburban campus spread out over acreage, and there's a building or a segment of the building set aside for daycare. In other words, a real school, not just daycare. And so the kids are right there, and the women or the men can go and visit the kid and stop by and see what's going on. And everybody's in one place rather than worrying about commutation times, efforts, missing out on stuff. And it becomes a purposeful driven company, not just a linear thing.
I like that idea. I've not really heard of anybody doing it. I know that, companies have done those steps with daycare centers. And also I've seen more and more companies that now have lactating rooms or breastfeeding rooms as well. So, focusing on that for the mothers who, still have that need every day. But I think I like the way you finished that off. It's not just the moms, it's the dads too. It's everybody. And, interesting. It almost in some ways goes back to, wasn't it in the 1870s or 1900? Remember the company towns that were built? Wasn't Pullman built, I think, outside Chicago or something?
Right.
I don't know my history as well about some of these things, but there used to be these company towns, so to speak. But unfortunately, the companies charged everybody. I think they went down south because you would pay somebody several $100s a month in wages at the time, but then their cost of living in the town was a couple $100s a month, so they didn't really get any savings out of it. But it's kind of that concept of adding more, thinking from a societal standpoint about your workforce, not just a company result standpoint. And we'll see where it goes.
Well, particularly companies taking the lead. This is not political. This is strictly business. The show, but there's a declining quality of public school education, not just because of the pandemic screwing everything up, but it's dangerous in some communities. But in the company area, it's not dangerous. It's safe, and it's altruistic, and it's futuristic as well, I think. And it's taking the old ideas and bringing them forward. And it's people-centric. It's like an employee assistance plan.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that people should be. You're on the right track. Is what people should be thinking about doing. I don't have the answers. I'll guarantee you. In that area, in some cases, as you're talking there, I think, well, wow, why not Google? Google has one huge campus. Although I know they do have offices around the world, but in Google that might make sense. But then I think about a manufacturing company that has manufacturing locations in 12 different cities across the country or across the world. That would almost mean setting up 12 different schools or mini schools, micro schools you talk about. I don't know. The logistics, they're not in my realm of expertise, but I like the thinking.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So we're talking about being people oriented, but within a company system of productivity. HUMONY. So tell us what's on your website, this new website, HUMONY.
HUMONYleadership.com. Some of the basic ideas around it. There's things like why you as a person, and again, whether you're a first line supervisor on up to an entrepreneur building their own business, why you should become a HUMONY leader. What would be the benefits to you as well as to your people? One of the things I'll guarantee you is that your company doesn't have to change. If you change as a person, as a human being, in whatever size organization you work for, your own career will advance because you're going to get better results. You're going to have lower employee turnover. You're going to have higher productivity. You're going to have more creative, innovative people on your team, and you're going to be recognized as a successful leader. So there's a little, the old what's in it for me. There's a lot what's in it for you of making this mindset change, of changing the behaviors, implementing the skills that we talk about. So that's kind of the focus of the website. Obviously, there's a synopsis of the book, a couple of comments of people have made some nice comments about the book on the website, but the general philosophy of HUMONY and HUMONY leadership is on the website.
So we're talking with Stephen Howard, the author of 22 books. This is number 22. And it's always been about leadership, learning about leadership and what it takes. So there's so many people dealing with uncertainty and ambiguity and emotional intelligence and resilience. It sounds like it's almost a social work thing, but that's reality, isn't it?
It is reality. Yeah, and it's not social work in terms of these are the skills. And we used to call them, and some people still call them, soft skill. My philosophy is these are essential skills: adaptability, resiliency, emotional intelligence is probably the foundation of becoming a good leader going forward. In one, understanding yourself, and then two, understanding other people and how to deal with those people. So these are essential skills, are what I call them, as really success skills for the future.
So in coming editions of this program, Stephen Howard and I are going to go a little bit deeper, and we welcome you to join us. So Stephen Howard, thank you very much for what I found to be really interesting and stimulating conversation here. It's all about well-being and stress management and productivity. And even though they may be soft skills, if you don't take care of them, they're going to cost you millions of dollars in a larger operation. Absolutely. And so it's really hard. It's not soft.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And these are the skills that will lead to sustainable success going forward. So one thing I would encourage the viewers out there, Ed, is ask them, put their questions in the comment box on your site or YouTube, wherever we show this video.
Good idea.
And let's get questions for the future. And or reach out to me. My email address is stephen@humonyleadership.com. Send me your questions, send me your topics. What do you want to hear more about? And Ed and I'll address it in future episodes.
Stephen Howard, take care. Have a good week. And thank you again for being on Global TV Talk Show.
Thank you very much, Ed. I'll look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.